What's going on, everyone? Fearless Football Forecast here. It is episode 5. Crazy to think that we're already down 5 episodes, but my excitement for the NFL season is amping up. Today, we're going to be breaking down 2 divisions. We're going to be doing this over the next couple weeks. Today, we're going to be covering the AFC South and the NFC South.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to start doing these videos. That time is starting to get here where football is right around the corner. Training camp's starting next week. I didn't realize how soon it was for preseason. I was talking to Dallas today, and it's your birthday is the first preseason game, so
Oh,
we're getting close. So I'm getting hyped. And when we went over our AFC and NFC, just the conference previews, one of the things that really stood out to me is once I got to actually talk about it to you, because most of these things I've been just going over in my head to myself. It kind of switched up the way I feel, so I'm excited to talk through all these teams and kind of get a better sense of how I feel on each team.
Oh, of course. And this is the best now that we're going to actually break down each team, talk about their off seasons, talk about their drafts, talk about our thoughts on them. But first, we have a little bit of breaking news. This one happened last week. We just want to keep everyone updated. DeAndre Hopkins has signed with the Titans. When we start talking about the Titans later on in this video, we're going to be talking about that more in depth. Also, if you want to hear our initial reaction and how we think it's going to impact the team and fantasy, go check out the video that we made last week. The link is in the description below. But the first news topic and the only news topic that we're actually going to break down before we get to these divisions is the holdouts and the signings or not signings of NFL running backs, including Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, and Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people kind of have a consensus of everything that's going to happen. I did find it, there were kind of conflicting reports saying that the Giants and Saquon were far away, but there seemed to be a little bit of chatter that they were going to come together and get a deal done. Obviously, that didn't happen. What I think is going to happen is Pollard. I'm pretty sure it's understood he's going to do all training camp. They said, and he's fine playing on the tag, which I get because for him that's life-changing money, so he should. The other guys, they're both first-round picks, so I guess they have the luxury to be able to sit out and get the fines for training camp. And that's what I expect. I expect both of them to sit out all of training camp. But do you see either one of them doing anything in the actual game? Like missing week 1?
I mean, I think Saquon's probably going to miss time. And as a dynasty owner of Saquon, I'm already preparing. I picked up Matt Breida on the waivers. I'm terrified, honestly, that Saquon's going to hold out. Knowing, though, that the Giants were just in the playoffs and they really didn't bring in many weapons for the offense, I think they're going to do everything in their power to make Saquon happy. It just seems like Saquon, out of the 3, Pollard, Jacobs, and Saquon's probably the most diva, but at the same time, he has the biggest reason to be, considering he's the most talented. But at the same time, he hasn't really been healthy enough to where I would be willing to pay him for a long-term deal. So honestly, as much as I love Saquon, I think the Giants are probably making the right decision by not overpaying him right now. Is there a way where they can make a deal where he gets incentives to play more and altered contract? Because right now I saw he was only like making 10 mil on their franchise tag, and I don't think he's going to come back if it's just that much money.
Yeah, so there's really nothing that they can do incentive-wise for him. That's what sucks. They missed the deadline. So they missed the deadline. There's nothing they could do. What I was wondering, and I meant to look into this a little bit more before we actually started the podcast, is I heard this. I think I saw it on Twitter. Someone bring it up. Because technically the Giants could rescind the franchise tag, and like people were saying, what if they rescinded the franchise tag? The agent goes, listen, if you pay us $14 million a year, we're not going to mess around with any other team. We'll sign with you. And I meant to look into if you could actually do that, but I feel like you can't do that either because it would defeat the entire purpose. Yeah, because they couldn't rescind it, and then he would just become a free agent. But I assume that if you rescinded that you would lose. That would be you saying, all right, I'm done with them. So yeah, really at this point, Saquon's been doing all this talk. It's going to be interesting to see if he'll really miss games. It's weird because the Giants are one of those teams who, they'll probably be competitive game in, game out, but they're not making a deep playoff run. They'll probably do something similar to what they did last year at best. So it's interesting that they paid Daniel Jones because they want to stay competitive, but you're not going to pay Saquon because if we're being honest, I mean, Daniel Jones is fine, but that's more of a day ball thing. Like, Saquon is the identity of this team. If he decides to sit out the entire season, this offense, I mean, Dayball is great, but I don't see it being very good, and the Giants would be honestly pretty terrible.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So we'll continue to monitor it in the next coming weeks. First, we're going to cover the NFC South, then we're going to get to the AFC South. So basically what we're going to do is talk about each team, and then at the very end of the video, so stay tuned the whole time, we're going to actually give our predictions on how everyone is going to pan out. The NFC South last year was a dumpster fire. Other than the Bucks, who they were an 8-win team and they ended up making it into the playoffs, still got a home field advantage, ended up losing to the Cowboys in the first round of the playoffs. Before we talked about the NFC in our podcast, I wasn't really that excited for this division, but like you said, after we talked about it, now I'm kind of getting a little excited. I think that the Panthers and Falcons have made considerable steps to increase their value. And the Saints, we talked about it many times with Derek Carr. They should be a dominant team this year. And the Bucks, the team that won the division last year, is probably going to be somewhere toward the bottom. I don't know where you have them officially ranked, but it's going to be very interesting. And so we're going to talk about the teams in the order that they finished last year, not how we think they're going to finish. And the first team to talk about would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, so really before we were getting into this, I just did like a primer, looked everything up to see what kind of moves they made, and I just wrote down the ones that I thought were, most important. Obviously, biggest thing, losing Brady. That sucks. But Brady wasn't the only big piece they lost. They lost Donovan Smith, Fournette, Cameron Brate, Sean Murphy-Bunting, and Shaq Mason. So, I mean, they lost a good bit of pieces to their team from last year. It's crazy to think because they barely won the division. That division was so bad last year. And what you said, what I think, the more I've been thinking about it, is I'm just so excited. I think that the NFL is going to be as competitive as it's been the past few years. Like every division, every team. Obviously, there'll be a couple stinkers, but really, I don't see a chance where the Bucs can win the division again. I didn't mind their draft, with Kalijah Kancey. I like Kalijah Kancey. They got that DN from Louisville, Yaya Diaby or whatever, and there were a couple guys who thought that maybe he should have went a little bit earlier. But personally, I just don't see a world where I think the defense is going to be solid, but I'm just not willing to trust Baker Mayfield. We've seen it so many times on so many different situations. I just don't think, and it's funny because he has the weapons. I think that they'll be competitive in games, but I don't think it'll show up in the record.
I'm wondering too, because obviously I like Trask a lot. I'm wondering because I would say that they're going to have to start Baker just on name value and just to get the season kicked off. But they're the type of team that, like you said, their defense is really the anchor for the team. And a running back that we're really excited for this year in fantasy and what we think is going to have a great statistical season in the actual NFL is Rachaad White. So defense and a run game. You don't want a quarterback that's going to be turning the ball over a lot. You don't want a quarterback that's going to be trying to make flashy plays and end up costing the team. And I think that that's going to be Baker. So I'm thinking that maybe after 3 or 4 weeks of Baker having a lot of turnovers, Kyle Trask ends up starting and then is kind of just that guy in place for the rest of the season so they don't lose games via turnovers, but they don't win games because of Kyle Trask. I just think that Trask is going to be more of like a game manager once he's in there. But I don't see Baker Mayfield being the starting quarterback for the entire season. And if he is, I think their record's going to be much worse because I think Trask can at least not lose them a game. So I'm personally on the pro Kyle Trask side. especially when it comes to Rachaad White's fantasy outlook and value, because Trask loves dumping the ball off. A lot of the plays that he ran in Florida were screens. So both of us think, though, that Rachaad White is going to be probably an 1,000-yard rusher this year and get he had like 50 receptions last year. So the sky's the limit, really, for Rachaad White this year.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, no matter who's starting at quarterback, it's really going to be dink and dunk offense. And, Godwin's going to be down low. The rookie tight end from last year, his name is avoiding me right now. I can't remember his name for some reason. And Rachaad White. And then every once in a while you get a play action bomb to Mike Evans. But I truly don't think that this offense, I think it's going to be, in the bottom third of the NFL. And I think that that's going to end up obviously having an impact on the defense that has the talent to be a good defense in the NFL. But, if you're on the field most of the game, you're just going to get tired and beat up. And by the end of the year, I feel like a lot of guys, might kind of give up, which is, it sucks to say, but what's the point of playing your heart out on defense if your offense is putting up 17 points a game? So yeah,
I don't see them putting up more than that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They'll be kind of like, I honestly kind of think they'll be like maybe a little bit better than the Broncos of last year because they were just so bad. But like, I don't see them. I agree. That's 17-ish points per game range, and I just don't think that's going to be enough to win games.
No, and the final question I want to ask you about this team is, I know we've talked to extent about Rachaad White as far as fantasy goes. We've talked a bit about Godwin. But what are your thoughts on Mike Evans this year? Because I'm out. I don't want a piece of Mike Evans. I just think for where you're drafting him, it's just not worth it whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like to me, I don't like it's not that high of an asking price. Like, what's he going in like the seventh-ish round, something like that, like sixth, seventh round, which isn't horrible. But I agree, I'm not touching him. I just don't think the outcome where he's productive to me seems so little in the equation. Like, I give it like a 10% chance. I think if anybody from the receiving room is going to do anything, it's going to be Godwin, just because he'll be doing a lot of the underneath work, getting peppered with the targets. I don't think either quarterback is going to be good enough in the medium or deep game to make Mike Evans what he's been. I mean, when you really think about Mike Evans, he's a bully in the red zone guy. I don't see them being in the red zone all that often, and he's a deep threat, which, I don't see either of those quarterbacks pushing the ball too far downfield. So for me, I'm out on Mike Evans as well. I'm interested to see, honestly, the biggest thing I'm interested to see with this team is what happens at the trade deadline, to see if they start shedding some of their older guys for future picks, like a Levante David on defense, Devin White. There was rumors about him this offseason, or even a guy like Mike Evans, maybe a contender in the middle of the year is like, hey, we'll give you a third-round pick for Mike Evans, and I'm interested to see if they'll hold on to him for sentimental reasons, or if they're like, listen, we need to rebuild this thing from the ground up.
I mean, they probably should do that, but as you've seen as a franchise, the Bucs have been very reluctant to do a full-on rebuild. Even when they brought in Brady, they just signed a bunch of veterans. They've been very much a free agent-heavy team. And so it would be interesting to see if the front office, goes a little bit against the grain and ends up looking forward to trading away their assets. I agree. I think that that's what they should do. The next team, and this is one that I was actually now very excited to talk about, the Carolina Panthers. Looking at their offseason, they did whatever they could to revamp their offense. Their defense has a lot of studs on it. I love this roster in general. They brought in Frank Reich now as the head coach. They did a lot to bring in new weapons, even though none of them are that great. They brought in Miles Sanders at running back. They have Hayden Hurst at tight end now, and added DJ Chark and Adam Thielen to a wide receiver core that's pretty much just led right now by Terrace Marshall. But bringing in Thielen for a rookie quarterback, there's no one else that I would really trust with the ball like Adam Thielen. He's not really going to give you much flash, but as you know, even at this age, he can still produce. And then DJ Chark's a great deep threat. The Panthers are a team that I think can surprise a lot of people this year. They have a hell of a roster. That defense, we thought that they were going to be really good last year.
Yeah.
And it looked
I was
like
in
it
on
for
him.
3 games.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold played well for a little bit, and then everything went to shit. I think they were 4-0 at one point, and then everything just went to dog shit. They got rid of DJ Moore. They made some trades, and now we have a team that could either, in my opinion, win this division or be even worse than the Bucs, depending on the quarterback play.
Yeah, so for me, this is another team where it's funny. I like a lot of the pieces, but where I don't like them, I think it's just going to be so hard. So I think Bryce Young is going to be like a solid quarterback, like like a league average quarterback, um, good enough to win games with weapons around you. Which on defense, the defense I think is fantastic. Um, you know, they have Brian Burns, Chin, Horn was injured last year. C.J. Henderson, like the list goes on and on and on. Derek Brown, like their defense is great. They have talent all over. But you go on the offensive side, I don't mind Miles Sanders as RB1 because to me, running back is one of the positions. If you have to lack somewhere, it's running back. I like
Chuba
their
Hubbard's a
O-line.
very solid backup, though, too.
Exactly.
So I
No,
think
I
their
like
run
Hubbard.
game's going to be fine.
Yeah, exactly. And their offensive line is good. The big problem is the weapons. You said it. If Adam Thielen is the number one on this team, it's going to be some sad days in Carolina this year. Chark, he's athletically gifted. Mingo, he's a big guy. He also is athletically gifted, but he's a rookie, and I'm just not all that convinced that he's going to make an impact, especially this year. I think Thielen is basically dust. I mean, he'll have a half-decent year just because he'll probably get a decent amount of targets. To me, the one guy I actually like for fantasy in this division is Hayden Hurst, just because I think that there's a way, he's one of those sneaky tight ends who there's a chance that he is second on the team in targets. I think that the receivers are just going to be all spread around. And I don't know. I said it when we did the NFC breakdown of that entire conference. Them getting rid of DJ, and it's weird that you think one player, does it really make that big of a difference? Sometimes it does. I know I'm higher on DJ Moore than a lot of people, and for good or for bad, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But if they still had DJ Moore, I would honestly think of this team a decent bit different. I would think that they would be able to compete for the division because they have the defense. But I don't know. I think the receiving weapons are so you don't even have to worry about them in a sense. And for a rookie quarterback, I think it's going to be a problem to not have someone he can rely on essentially at all. I mean, obviously, like we said, Thielen's been that, but if he's getting, I guess Chark will probably eat up the number one cornerback because he'll play X. But I just don't see the receiving core being able to help Bryce Young out enough for the offense to be good enough.
And this is a team that I can see matching up very badly against the Bucs, and this is where the Bucs are probably going to get some wins, just because that D line is still there. The linebackers are still there for the Bucs. And for a rookie quarterback, that's going to be pretty hard. I'm not too big on Bryce Young. I probably would have had him third or fourth in the QB rankings this year. So we'll see what happens with the Panthers. But honestly, after talking about them a little bit, I feel less confident in them where I initially had them ranked, and I'll probably end up moving them down by the end of this episode. But a team that I'm definitely moving up is the New Orleans Saints. We have talked to extent, if you've watched this podcast, about the Saints, so we'll try and keep it concise today. Of course, mainly Derek Carr being there. It's just going to help them out so much. Defense last year was ranked 4th in the NFL, and that was with them being on the field so often. So they might end up being the number 1 or number 2 defense this year now that they're going to be on the field a lot less. With Derek Carr, sophomore year receiver Chris Olave is going to have a breakout season. I love what they did in the draft. They kept it conservative. They just picked the best player available on the defensive line. They continued to bolster the defensive line. They didn't take both the players that they drafted in the first and second round were players who are pretty safe. Neither of them have too crazy upside, but they're not going to ruin the team, and they can be plug and play guys if anyone on the starting lineup gets injured. So the Saints are a team that, looking at their schedule, looking at their roster, looking at the rest of the teams in this division, I've made a bold prediction before and said that I think that the Saints can have the best record in the NFC, and that's not a shot against the Eagles or the Cowboys. It's that they play each other, whereas the Saints are going to be playing these teams that just don't have the quarterback play. I think Derek Carr has always been a very talented quarterback, and he's just lost in close games to Mahomes and Justin Herbert over the years, and now he's clearly above and beyond the best quarterback in his division. And there's a lot of weapons to play with here. Michael Thomas could still come back. Juwan Johnson is there. Foster Moreau was brought in. Brian Edwards was brought in. Two guys that were already familiar with Carr. I love this defense. Lattimore is going to be healthy this year. He wasn't last year. There's a lot to really feel promising about this team. If only they still had Chauncey. They got rid of him for nothing a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we've talked about him a ton. I kind of feel the same way in the sense that I had this thought today. I was thinking about it, I started thinking about Michael Thomas a little bit more. And I'm kind of thinking, obviously, they're not the same type of receivers, but like this is probably the best duo Carr's had at receivers since Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree days. And obviously, Olave and Cooper are different players. But like I kind of think that, and again, Michael Thomas hasn't been this guy in the NFL, but like, big body guy can kind of bully people. He's mainly been slant boy. No, I'm kidding. I actually like Michael Thomas.
And Juwan Johnson has the athletic profile to be comparable with Darren Waller. He's just got to get the hands,
Yeah. I'm a believer in Juwan Johnson.
No, I think Juwan Johnson's actually a big sleeper this year.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, I think that they're going to be a good team. They're going to be competitive in every single game. They'll have a hell of a chance to win this division and make the playoffs. The defense is going to be solid again. They still have a lot of that core from last year. And they, like you said, they added to the defensive line. Lattimore is going to be more healthy than he was last year. So I am excited to see how the Saints do. To me, I do think this is going to be a two-man race in this division. I love Olave. We all know from the first podcast, I love Olave. I think that he's going to be awesome this year. I'm very excited to see how he plays. To have a chance with, a real NFL quarterback, not to throw shade at Winston. He's fun to watch, but he hasn't been great for a long time. Even his one great year, he had, it was like 30 touchdowns and 29 interceptions or something crazy. Yeah. So, and obviously Dalton he's done by now. I mean, but I'm excited to see how this team performs. I think that, you may be surprised on how I feel after really thinking things over and after talking things out last time we kind of got into divisional talk about this division, but I think that they're definitely going to be competitive and, they're going to have a chance they can win against any team in the NFL. I think they're a talented enough team for that.
Yeah, I think the pendulum, even if it's swinging a little bit negatively for you, I think it's swinging even more positively for me, especially after the Alvin Kamara news. No official word yet on how long he's going to be out, but that's by far the best running back tandem as well. So to have the receivers that we just mentioned, the run game, to keep the offense on the field, to allow that defense to rest up, I think that's just going to be so crucial and bring the Saints from a 7-win team to probably like a 12 or 13-win team. Like I am very confident that this team has a big chance to be in the NFC Championship game this year. It's just, if you look back at even when Breeze was struggling, and obviously this isn't the same Saints team, but a lot of the components are kind of, like a mirror image to that. When Breeze was struggling, they really relied on the combination of Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. And now they have Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams. I think Jamal Williams might have been the most underrated free agent signing of the year in terms of overall impact on a team. When they're within the 5, he's the guy to go to. When Kamara's, not ready to go, he's going to be the go-to guy. He's always going to be able to get you at least 3 yards in tight yardage situations, which is going to take a lot of pressure off Derek Carr. And I feel like Carr's never really had that. Yes, Josh Jacobs is a phenomenal back, but in those situations, I would prefer to hand the ball off to Jamal Williams. Having Kamara to be there for receptions underneath, I don't know if there's an offense in the league. Honestly, the more I'm thinking about it, they might actually have the most well-rounded offense in the league. And that's crazy to say, but the more I think about it, I'm pretty confident in that statement. But next up, last but definitely not least, because I think we're both rising high on this team, the Atlanta Falcons. They didn't do much as far as their defense. They brought in some veterans this offseason. They brought in Calais Campbell. And I do like that they got Taylor Heineke because if Desmond Ridder doesn't really pan out within the first 6 weeks, then they have a guy who, similar to what I was mentioning with Trask earlier, he's not going to lose them games, but he's not going to win them games. He's going to be a decent play for them. The Falcons are a team that are very gritty. They were 4th in rushing last year, and that was before they ended up drafting maybe the best running back prospect in the last decade in Bijan Robinson. So I only expect the rushing statistics to go up this year with this absolute savage of a back they have. If you've seen any of our videos on the channel, I am very high on Kyle Pitts. I think that he's going to have a phenomenal season. For me, this really comes down to is their defense, because I just don't see their defense competing with the other defenses in this division. And I actually do like Desmond Ridder. I think that he's a solid talent. I think the flashes that we saw from him last year proved his athleticism. And also he did have the clutch factor. He did come back in some of the games that he was down in, and that's something that you really want to see in a rookie.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm really excited about the Falcons. The more I think about it, the more and more I'm excited for them, if I'm being honest. So they brought in Calais Campbell to the D-line. You know, he's an older guy, but I think that veteran presence is going to be good for the defense. Bud Dupree, you know, he wasn't great in Tennessee, but I think he has talent. We'll see how he performs this year. Jeff Okudah, that trade they made for Okudah, I was really excited about that because I do think that Terrell is a true number 1 cornerback. Jeff Okudah, he was the 3rd pick in the draft, 3-4 years ago. He has the talent. Will he finally put it together? And to me, it's been mostly injuries with him. And on top of that, they drafted Clark Phillips, who was a guy who slipped because he's kind of smaller, but when you look at how he performed in college, he was great. And then Jesse Bates, you know, he was one of the leaders for that Cincinnati Bengals defense. And having, you know, safety is a weird position because you think about it and you're like, you don't really want to pay a safety. But when you have the money to be able to pay a safety, having a truly elite safety is pretty amazing because, you know, Jesse Bates is one of those guys who he can play single high. He can play man-to-man. He can come down and make tackles. I think that that's going to be really good for them. So I actually am excited for this defense. I think that, you know, the median play is that the Saints, you know, more than likely the Saints will have a better defense. But I think that if everything kind of gels together correctly, I think the Falcons could have a very good defense.
I think they're going to be a really explosive defense too. Like with Bates, with Okudah, a lot of turnovers. I can see coming from this defense.
Right. And I also think that, like you said, I'm also a Desmond Ridder believer. Now, do I think he's going to end up being like a, oh my God, breakout second-year amazing quarterback? No, but I think he's one of those guys who, with the talent that he has around him, they're not deep with their offensive skill weapons. But Bijan Robinson, like you said, I agree, one of the best running back prospects since we've been watching football to come by easily. He's great in the run game. He's great in the receiving game. Drake London, I think, is a true number 1 receiver. And Kyle Pitts, although we talked about him and I don't love him for fantasy, I mean, for real life, I love the guy. He's a freak athlete. As your number 2 target, you know, you would assume that it's interesting because teams are going to go one of 2 ways. They're either going to double London and then Pitts can eat, or they're going to focus on Pitts and London can eat. it's scary that Mac Hollins is probably going to end up being their receiver too. But I like Hollins enough because technically he's the third option. Honestly, probably the fourth option because I think Bijan is going to have a lot of receptions this year. But they also have depth at the running back position. Algier is great for the ground and pound. Cordell Patterson is great in the receiving game. I could see them spreading Cordell Patterson out wide. I could see them bringing Bijan and Patterson in the same formation, and then the defense is like, what are they going to do? You know, screen game galore, options, all that kind of stuff. And I think that the O-line, they've really not been afraid to invest in the offensive line these past few years. They added a second-round pick, Bergeron, the guard, to this offensive line. So I think they have a pretty solid offensive line. I wouldn't say it's like elite, but they have a good offensive line. And if you give Ridder time, I think that one of the big three weapons will find a way to get open. So I'm pretty excited. I like Arthur Smith. I should mention that as well. I think that he's one of the coaches who can scheme well, especially run game, screens, things like that. So I'm really excited for the Falcons this year. It's one of the teams that the closer we get, the more and more excited I am. I think that they're going to be real trouble for the Saints this year.
And let's not forget they have one of the best kickers in all of the league in Younghoe Koo. So in close game scenarios, that guy's not going to miss. Yeah, I think that this defense is kind of like a band of misfits. I think they're all very talented players, but like you said, do they gel? They really don't have a linebacker. Like, they don't really have a great linebacking core, and I know that that's becoming less of a concern in the NFL nowadays. But in a division with solid running backs like Rachaad White, like the double-headed monster that I just mentioned with the Saints, like Miles Sanders, they're going to need to have some tackles and end up keeping the other offense off the field. And I think they're going to have an issue with that. Although I do think that they're going to have a lot of turnovers. It's really all going to come down to Desmond Ridder and how advanced he is this year. I agree with you that Pitts and London are just going to be amazing. And I still don't know why you're not in on Kyle Pitts, especially after just hearing yourself say that some games they're going to double London and then Pitts is going to eat underneath. So he might have multiple 100-yard games. But yeah, so now I feel like we've talked about each of these teams to an extent. So before we move on to the AFC South, let's give our predictions on how they're going to finish.
All right, so you want to go best to worst or worst to best? What do you want to do?
Best to worst.
All right. So the more and more
well, we can do worst to best. We can do worst to best.
Yeah,
keep it interesting.
All right, yeah. We'll do that. All right. So I think Bucks are going to come fourth, Panthers third, and I alluded to it earlier. It's going to come down to these two teams for the division. And I'm going to take that leap of faith and hope that the Falcons defense does end up, John. I'm going to have the Falcons winning the division and the Saints second.
Now, do you have the Saints as a playoff team?
So I think that they'll definitely be in a spot for the playoffs. I think that this division is going to end up being one of those divisions where only one team makes it out, just because I think that I like the Niners, obviously Niners, Cowboys, Eagles. I'm just shooting off the top of my head. The Falcons. We got the North. Yeah, I think that they'll be right on the edge. If they make the playoffs, it'll be as a 7 seed.
Gotcha. So I'm pretty much the same, just reversed at the top. I have the Bucks coming in last, Panthers coming in third. But now I'm considering maybe, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to go Panthers fourth, Bucks third, Falcons second, but still making the playoffs because I can see them winning like 9 wins. And then Saints first, just because I think that the Saints are going to maybe even be the number 1 seed in the NFC, if not number 2. So here we go, switching things up now, going to a different conference. We got the AFC South. We're really talking about the 2 shittiest divisions right now, but they're exciting because these are divisions that not a lot of people like to talk about. We had last year, the standings came in where it went Jaguars, Titans, Colts, Texans, and that's the order that we're going to be talking about them this time around. So we might as well start with the team whose jersey I'm repping right now, the man whose jersey I'm repping right now. My local team, I'm only 45 minutes away from Jacksonville. the Jaguars. Now, such a crazy season last year to go from having the number one pick to making it 2 rounds in the playoffs and losing to Patrick Mahomes in a one-score game is just mind-boggling. And it's either going to go one of two ways for the Jags. Either that was the truth and they're going to end up having a dominant season this year, or two, that was just a flash in the pan. And I am personally, not just because I'm wearing the jersey, I think it's going to be more toward that first side. I think Trevor Lawrence, a lot of people forget that he was hyped up as the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. And even some people were saying Peyton Manning for a while. And he's a guy that so many other quarterbacks have come out in the last couple of years, Burrow, Mahomes, and they weren't getting as much love as Trevor Lawrence was coming out of college. So it's only due for Trevor Lawrence to end up breaking out, really. And last year he had a good season, but he didn't have a phenomenal season. And I think that this year, now that they got Calvin Ridley in the offense to pair with Christian Kirk, who's already been there, ETN, I like that they drafted Tank Bigsby. They re-signed Evan Ingram. Another year under the Doug Peterson offense, who's always been, a QB guru. I think that Trevor Lawrence is going to have a great season. Their defense, they did lose a bit at corner. But Josh Allen, I think, is one of the best defensive ends in the league right now. That he's a very underrated player. And Trayvon Walker, from reports from camp, are that he's making improvements, and he was the number one pick last year. And remember, last year he was a project player to begin with. He wasn't supposed to be a phenomenal talent in year one. I like what they did, rebuilding their offensive line. I think that the Jaguars have a great season this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going to piggyback off of what you said. I can't really deny. I mean, I'm a big Dougie Fresh guy. I love Doug Peterson. He brought home a Super Bowl to my Philadelphia Eagles, and I think that he is one of the better coaches in the NFL. So game planning wise, most games they're going to come in with the edge of the coach. And I think, like you said, Trevor Lawrence, we saw him take that step, and I think that he's only going to get better from here out. They lost Jawan Taylor, but they immediately drafted Anton Harrison from Oklahoma, so I think that he's going to, maybe not start the year fitting right or being the exact same type of guy, but I think eventually by the end of the year he'll be a consistent right tackle. Their offensive line is solid. And they have a playmaker in Travis Etienne. They brought in Ridley, like you said. I like Ridley for the team. I don't really like him for fantasy purposes, but I do like him to eat up the number one corner, and I think it's just going to help Christian Kirk even more. I mean, we saw how productive he was last year with everyone knowing that he was the number one weapon on the team. So I think that they have an exciting receiving core. Even Evan Ingram just signed that extension a couple of days ago. So I think that the offense is going to be good. Really, your only concern is the defense. I think this is one of those defenses who's not going to be consistently great. They're going to have to rely on kind of the big-time plays. But I can see them doing that. Like, I could see them being like a bend but don't break defense. Timely sacks from Walker or Allen, stuff like that. So I think that at the end of the day, they're the favorites to win the division, and it makes sense on why they would be the favorites. Trevor Lawrence, I do completely agree. He's one of the upper echelon quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think this year, like I said, last year he took that step to say, oh, okay, so this guy's he's got it in the NFL. I think this year he kind of says, yeah, I'm one of the better quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I mean, the defense showed that they were good in big games. I mean, they held the Chargers to only 3 points in the second half of that the playoff game. They stopped the Cowboys basically the entire second half. They're like a big second half defense. And if they can just, flip the switch on that and be consistent, like you said, that's where the true upside for this team truly lies. And in a division where we're not really expecting any of these teams to have over like 11 wins, I think it's very reasonable that the Jaguars can get like 9 or 10 wins and end up making the playoffs. Up next, a team that I'm actually growing on every single day, not just because of the DeAndre Hopkins deal, but just because I think that they're a team that's being very overlooked. They didn't really do much in the offseason. They just signed Murphy Bunting, who's very solid. He's never, shown any discourse in the league. But they also just signed DeAndre Hopkins, drafted Will Levis in the second round. I really like their first round pick of Peter Skoronski. They have some weapons now, with Hopkins being there. Chiga Okonkwo, a guy that both of us are very confident in. We think he's a great player. Treylon Burks, who it's probably best that he's not the one. Now he's the two. And Derrick Henry, a guy who I think, as far as fantasy and real life, a lot of people are really overlooking him. And last year, he was actually getting involved more in the passing game. The Titans, yes, they lost 8 straight games at the end of the season last year. That is horrific, and that should not be, forgotten. But at the same time, they were without Ryan Tannehill for a majority of those games. Will Levis showed that he couldn't complete a pass. They had Joshua Dobbs starting a game in prime time. That's ridiculous. That should never happen. So this is a team that has a lot of question marks around it, and a lot of people are, on the negative, but it's still one of the better coaches in the league in Vrabel. One of the better defenses in the league when they're fully healthy. They just re-signed Jeffrey Simmons. And a team that now added one of the best wide receivers to an offense that, yes, was abysmal last year, but throughout history has proven when there's been 2 receivers, when it was A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, that it can flow and that Derrick Henry can be that guy. They're a team that's been in the playoffs the majority of the last decade, and I don't see a reason why they can't make it this year. I was originally very high on the Jags in general, and now I'm starting to think that it might be a little bit closer. In this division, I think that the Titans have that nastiness about them. They're really, one of those teams that beats you up at the line of scrimmage. We're going to see what happens. The biggest question mark for me would be the offensive line, but like I said, they just added Skoronski. They did lose some pieces, but Tannehill, it's insane because I feel like we were talking about him 10 years ago and now we still are. And it's just like he's still in the league and everyone's going to keep doubting him, even though he's been in the playoffs multiple times.
Yeah, so this is one of those teams that I'm interested to see how I feel because, that Hopkins news is new. So off the top of my head, I think they have the pieces. They have a true number one. They have Chig, who I like as an auxiliary piece, and they have Derrick Henry to mow people down. That defense is going to be good. They have plenty of pieces, Kevin Byard, Jeffrey Simmons, and they have the coaching. Like you said, my biggest concern is the offensive line. They lost Taylor Lewan, who's been injured most of the past few years, and Ben Jones, who was injured last year as well. But they added Skoronski back. But they also, their tackle got suspended for the first 6 games because he was part of that gambling, that group of people that got banned or suspended from gambling. I think he's out 6 games. So to me, I think that's what it's going to come down to. Like you said, the Titans are one of those teams who just seem to always find a way. The defense is going to keep them in every game. And to me, the biggest question is going to be that offensive line. I wonder if – so originally before they got Hopkins, my assumption was they'll go into the year with Tannehill starting, but by week 5 when they suck, Levis will get in there. Now I kind of think that even if they start off slow, I could see them waiting until at least midseason to make a quarterback change. So that I think that they're going to be competitive in the beginning of the year. I'm interested to see how they fare by the end of the year because this is one of those teams that doesn't have a lot of depth to it in the NFL. If Hopkins or Henry goes down, it completely changes. And obviously that's a big assumption. But
They're 2 older players, so it's possible.
Exactly, and they've both had injuries. I mean, Henry was dealing with the foot a couple years ago, and Hopkins had that hamstring injury, even though he had the first 6 weeks off. So it's one of those teams where I think they're extremely fragile. But like you said, the coaching, the defense is going to keep them in games, and Tannehill is one of those guys who can make just enough plays to get you over the top. So I agree. Really, for me, it just makes this team more competitive in games. I don't really see them taking the division. I don't think that this move gets them that far. I know some people kind of think, oh, they have D-Hop now, their offense is going to flow. I think the offense will be fine. I don't think that they're going to win enough games to be in the conversation for the division. Um, I think this is going to be one of those teams that is just like every single week the game's going to be 24-21 or 27-21, like something like that, like lower end games, and it's going to be a coin flip on who squeezes it out. Um, but yeah, I kind of think it's going to be more of the same with the Titans, and by more of the same, I kind of lean towards what happened last year than the playoff years personally.
And the next team is the Indianapolis Colts. Didn't do much in the offseason as far as free agency. They really only just got Isaiah McKenzie. This is a defense that has been beat up the last couple of years when all the players are there, with Shaquille Leonard, with DeForest Buckner. They're a team that when their defense is popping, they can be one of the better teams in the league. They've had just a continuous QB carousel of having these old quarterbacks, and they finally broke it this year by drafting Anthony Richardson. Personally, I think Richardson was the best quarterback in this draft class, but that's not increasing my hopes on how this team is going to do as a whole. I think that they have a lot of good pieces. Their O-line is solid. I just have a lot of questions about if their defense can gel again, because now it's really been 3 years since we've really seen their defense step it up. And with a rookie quarterback, you don't want to have him out there on the field a lot. Richardson, I watched him play in person many times. I'm a University of Florida alum. He's a great talent. I think that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But year one, if he's out there and the defense is keeping him on the field, if he's on the field 70% of the game, there's going to be some turnovers. There's going to be some issues. So even though I like the players around him, I like Michael Pittman a lot. I think he's a true number one. I like Jonathan Taylor a lot. He's one of the better running backs in the NFL. I don't see much from this team, and I don't know why, because you would think, since I'm a big fan of Richardson, that I would like this team, but I, they just really, they're one of the teams that I think just doesn't have an identity, and they're desperate to need one.
Yeah, so I'm actually kind of excited for the Colts this year. Like you said, I'm a big Richardson guy too. We both are. And that's really what it comes down to me. They have the offensive line to compete. They have a star running back. They have someone I view as a true number one. I like Alec Pierce as a number two, and they drafted a deep threat in Josh Downs. Jelani Woods, I know, we both liked last year. He's just this big athletic tight end freak. And their defense, it's funny, their defense is always good, but they always have that one, like they always have like 2 or 3 games where you're like, is this the same Colts defense for the that it's been the whole year, like that the Vikings comeback game. They always have a few weird games where they just give up 40 for no reason. But I really liked the Colts draft in particular. They just got all athletic studs. Obviously, Richardson, probably the most athletic quarterback ever. Julius Brents is extremely athletic. He's like 99th percentile. I can't pronounce his name. It's like Adebawariye or however you pronounce his name, from Kansas State. They took him later on. He's extremely athletic. So, when you take guys who are athletic, that ceiling is always there. If their coaches can teach them the technique by the end of the year. I think that the beginning of the year might be tough. I think they're going to be one of the teams that the second half of the year we're like, wow, the Colts are going to be good next year. That's the way I view them. I really like Shane Steichen. I'm a little biased because I'm a Philly guy, but he seems to be able to adjust to the players that he's got at his disposal. When he was with Herbert a few years ago, before he was with the Eagles, Herbert's a guy who just has a cannon for an arm. He's slinging it all over the place. He helped Herbert play well. Last year, he's with Hurts, who has a good arm, not like outstanding, but good enough arm. He can still throw it deep, but he's not crazy throwing it out of the stadium. Richardson has both, which is, kind of scary and kind of like really exciting for the NFL. It's scary in the prospect of playing him. So I think that Shane Steichen is going to coach up Anthony Richardson. Um, I'm really excited. I think this is going to be one of those teams that they're not going to make the playoffs, but they're going to be one of those teams that, even though they're not going to make it, every year there's a couple of teams that aren't winning as many games, but they're still fun to watch. I think that's going to be the Colts this year. I think that they're going to be fun to watch. Anthony Richardson is going to make plays. He's going to have 3, 4, 5 plays every game that you're like, oh my God. And then, moving forward, he'll be, he's going to be great. But I think this year they're going to be one of those teams that is, competitive. It's funny, this whole division, our team, other than the Jags, I think the Jags have that step above everybody else. But the other 3 teams in me, they all have pieces to where I see them being competitive, especially the Titans and the Colts. But I don't think that they're going to be able to knock the Jaguars off the top.
Interesting, because I think that I agree. I like their draft class. I love Richardson. I think 2-3 years from now, this is a team that can compete. Right now, I think it would be a miracle if they won 6 games. I don't see them winning more than 5. But like you said, maybe like week 11, 12, they start turning up the heat a little bit. But we shall see. And a big part of that is because I do like this next team a lot. I think that they did a lot in the offseason to improve. Bringing in D'Amico Ryans, I think he's going to be one of those coaches that he just makes an immediate impact. I think that that's happening a lot more often in the NFL now. You see what happened with McDaniel on the Dolphins last year. Coaches are just coming in and changing a team's win total by like 5 to 6 wins, if not more. I think Ryans is going to be one of those guys, just brings in a lot of great players, too. They signed Sheldon Rankins, Denzel Perriman, Dalton Schultz on the offensive side, Jimmy Ward, Shaq Mason, Shaquille Griffin, who now is going to be playing against his former team in Jacksonville. Drafted C.J. Stroud, drafted Will Anderson. This team, to go from maybe one of the worst rosters in the league to one of the more exciting rosters in a blink of an eye, I think is really impressive. Obviously, when it comes to question marks for this team, it would be still their offense. Right now with Damian Pierce and Devin Singletary, it's unknown what's happening at running back. I know you're high on Mechie. I think he's going to be solid, but nothing great. If they're one of those teams that, how we mentioned Mike Evans earlier, I could see them making a push for a receiver mid-season, because I think it's going to be like, wow, this team is out of nowhere. You blink and the Texans are 5-2. And then you're like, holy shit, this team needs weapons now. And so with their offense, I think is going to really be the only thing holding them back. I like Stroud a lot. I think that as far as just plain old game managers, he was probably the best quarterback in this draft class. His upside's not there as much, but combining a team that's going to have a great defense, a great head coach, a lot of good free agent signings, a new mentality. And they were dogs the last 2 years, really. The Texans have been horrible, but they've been in games. They haven't been getting blown out. They've been in games. I'm really excited for this team. I think that in the way that you were saying that you think that the Colts are going to be the team that is really fun to watch, even though they're not, going to make the playoffs. I think that that's going to be the Texans. Would not be surprised if this team has like 8 or 9 wins by the end of the season.
Yeah, so I personally don't see them doing all that. I think they have pieces here and there on defense that I like. The safety, his name's not Petrie. Is it Petrie? The safety they took last year, his name is escaping me right now, from Baylor. I like him a lot.
Pitre. Yeah.
Yeah, so Petrie. All right, so it is Petrie. All right. Petrie I like a lot. Stingley I think is going to take another step forward. Will Anderson they bring in. Obviously, he's a little smaller for an edge rusher, but I still think that he's going to be great. It's going to be his rookie year, so we'll see how great this first year. I like C.J. Stroud, and I really like the offensive line. They have the 2 tackles, Tunsil and Tyus Howard. They bring in Shaq Mason, so I'm really excited about the offensive line. I like the running backs. Damian Pierce proved to be solid, and Singletary. It's funny because we talked about first and second pick both in the South divisions, one AFC, one NFC. I see the Texans a lot like how I see the Panthers. I just don't think the weapons are good enough for the Texans to win games like that. So that's why that trade that they made for Will Anderson, they're giving up their first round pick next year, I think was a bad idea because I think they're still going to have a pretty high pick. So in that sense, I still think that they're going to be last in this division overall. The other big concern for me, it's mainly the weapons. The other big concern is the offensive coordinator. We really haven't seen if he's going to be able to make an impact. I like D'Amico Ryans. I think he's going to keep the defense in check. I think he's going to be a motivator. But we really don't know what the offense is going to look like. And I like Stroud. I just think that literally Mechie and Schultz are the two best receiving options on this team. I like Mechie, but I don't think that he's a true number one receiver. The main reason I like him in the fantasy context is because no one else is there and he's just going to get peppered with targets. So I think that they're going to have a hard time on offense, and that's really going to drag them down. If they did end up mid-season adding a receiver, that would maybe change my opinion because, like I said, I just don't see them having the weapons to be able to win games like that this year.
As we just were talking, I just put a $100 bet on their over. Their win total right now is over 5.5. I think they easily get 6 wins. So I just placed a live bet live on the podcast. Nice $100. The bookie's going to be coming to collect probably. I got about $3,000 in NFL futures bets going. Speaking of that, we might as well plug our NFL futures bet episode. That should be on the channel by now, so check that out. I think the NFC South was honestly a little bit of a drag to talk about, to be fair. The AFC South now has me excited. I don't know. I think that there's going to be some fireworks from this division that absolutely sucks. Just getting into it right now, I'll give my rankings for how I have them panning out this year. I have the Colts at the bottom. Like I said, I don't think they win more than 4 games. I have the Texans third, considering putting them second, but I don't know. I think that the rest of these teams, I think it's going to go like 7 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins for the next of them. And so I'd have the Texans at third, the Titans in second, and the Jaguars still at the top, maybe with 9 or 10 wins. But I don't see 2 playoff teams in this division, especially since the AFC is just so loaded. I just don't see it happening. But it's going to be an interesting division, and the future's bright with 2 new young rookie quarterbacks that were both top 5 picks.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely exciting future. So for this year, fourth, I'm going to go Texans. Third, I'm actually going to go with the Titans. Second, I'm going to go with the Colts. And first, I'm going to go with the Jags. Those bottom 3 teams I don't really think are going to be competing for playoff spots. Maybe the first half of the year, the Titans look like they might compete. I think they'll probably fall off just like they did last year. I think the Jags, they're not going to necessarily walk away with the division, but I think by the end of the year, they'll be pretty comfortable lead. And I figure since, do you want to do, we'll bet a drink on it at the end of the year? Colts versus Texans head-to-head?
Colts versus Texans head-to-head record?
Yeah. And whoever loses has to get the other one a beer. All right. Virtual.
All right, there we go. Another bet made officially on the podcast. Well, this was really fun. Next week, we're going to be breaking down the AFC and NFC West. So those are 2 very exciting divisions. One's a really over the top, a lot of QB heavy division. The next one is very defense heavy. So we're going to be really excited. I'm super amped after talking about these divisions today that we're one of the crappier, 2 of the crappier divisions in the NFL. So if we had this much fun doing this one, how much fun are we going to have next week talking about those 2?
Yeah, I'm pretty hyped. I mean, you know that I love the AFC West. It's one of my, other than the NFC East, because of the Birds, the AFC West is probably my favorite division in football year in and year out because Mahomes and Herbert, I love seeing them battle every year.
And there you have it. So make sure to like this video. If you're listening on Spotify, turn on those notifications. Also, if you're on YouTube, but you know you're going to be on the go, make sure to check out the Spotify link that's down below, and we will catch you all next week.